I think it was, it seemed like the right place. I had a meeting with, our vice president, Mike Armstrong, at the time he was the director. And I noticed he had a couple of punk stickers on one of his notebooks. And that was kind of it. I was like, okay, like this seems like a place that I would really want to work. And, I think Mike noticed that in me and probably saw a little bit of himself when he was younger and in me as well. And, I was excited when I got offered it, and there was really no time in between. I went from college to job right off the bat doing marketing.
Right on. So what is your degree in?
So I mentioned that I failed out of college. So they offer a general studies type degree for those that just want to graduate. It's called interdisciplinary studies. And instead of having a major, I have two minors. First one is in psychology, which was my original major, and the second is in business management.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense why you landed in a marketing gig.
Exactly.
So this podcast generally is about doing things really well. And as we've alluded to, what I'm struck by throughout, let's call it your post-pubescent life, is your initiative and drive, which, I've had the opportunity to witness firsthand for quite some time. But I think it dovetails quite nicely into your knack for entrepreneurship. To that end, I want to dig into your time at Reed because there are two things that I'd like to focus on, for the show itself and dig into both your ability to show initiative to move yourself forward in your career, but then also talk about the entrepreneurship specifically after we get into this a little bit. I'm gonna start you at the beginning of your career at Reed because, and I'm gonna try to explain this as best as I can, and maybe you can add some color since you actually worked there. But
sure.
Reed Exhibitions is a huge global conglomerate that puts on trade shows for folks in all sorts of trades, whether you're talking about hardware stores or aluminum siding, the aluminum siding industry, pharmaceuticals, things of that nature, the really boring stuff. And you landed in central marketing, which is a division of the company that is very much just in charge of running marketing for these trade shows in these specific industries. So not the sexiest place to start. So let's start there, and then we'll kind of go through the process of landing yourself where you've landed.
Sure. So, like I mentioned, I started right out of school, and I think really the only reason why I fell into Reed Pop, it was kind of on accident. I originally interviewed for a marketing position for the fashion portfolio, which, is now owned by Reed Pop, but it wasn't, or now managed by Reed Pop, but at the time it wasn't. And I got to the interview and our HR director was like, the marketing director pulled his shoulder or something like that. So they're like, we're going to have you interview with Reed Pop instead. You can do the comic shows. So that was really all it came down to. And that's how I started talking with Armstrong. And I think it was the marketing director at the time, Jackie Williams. And that's how I really got my start with working for Pop, because now, they have their own marketing team, which they did at the time, but they used central marketing to kind of do some of the, not to disparage it, but it was some of the work that they just didn't have time for. I would call it grunt work to be more blunt. And everyone in central marketing felt bad for me. They were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You have to work on Pop." They all saw it as this very daunting and threatening task, which maybe it's just because it was the first thing I jumped into and I had no other scope of what the rest of the company did. But, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of, 12, 14-hour days doing various projects and whatnot. But I think it also allowed me the opportunity to kind of stand out, because there was really no other opportunity but to kind of grind and get through these projects. So I think, within 6 months, I had won 3 awards at their the end of the year ceremony. And then I started in central marketing in May, and I was out of central marketing by February because I got put up to Reed Pop as a marketing coordinator because they had finally decided they're going to do this whole restructuring and leave central marketing in general. And it was really nice that they didn't want to leave me behind. So, Armstrong came down one day and he's like, hey, you really should apply for this position. And that was, that's ultimately how you and I met. It was for the C2E2 marketing coordinating position.
Yeah. And so you make that transition once, and this gets a little bit inside baseball. But for the uninitiated, essentially, Reed Pop is a part of Reed Exhibitions that is focused exclusively on pop culture and comic book shows. We run fan conventions like New York Comic Con, C2E2 in Chicago, Emerald City Comic Con, and then the other side of the business handles the PAX video game events in Boston and Seattle and San Antonio, Texas, that sort of thing. So I think we can safely say a bit more in your wheelhouse than the National Hardware Show or Interfex.
Yes.
So a step in the right direction without question, like in terms of enjoying the work that you're doing and being passionate about it. Once I got there, which I would assume was, if you said February, so that must have been February of 2017. So
yeah.
So I started in July of 2017 there, and that's when we met and started working together on C2E2. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the kind, and you mentioned this briefly, talking about 12 to 14 hour days. What is the workload like when you're running up to a show like ours? I could talk about it all day, but I think this is your show, so let's talk about what your workload was like. Let's say 2 months out from a show that expects to see 85,000 people over 3 days.
I mean, it only gets worse, like it starts off relatively not too bad, and then you just kind of see it go uphill and uphill and uphill, where like hours just get longer and there's more to do and deadlines are getting shorter. I can't remember everything I did for marketing because it's been a couple of years, but it was everything from like dealing with partners to kind of handling like ticket reporting and just doing a lot of graphics work. I have no graphic design background. I learned everything I knew from Jackie Boswick, at this job. So it was a lot of that. And, I was very slow at it because it wasn't something that was intuitive for me, but so that took up a lot of it. And it's a lot of busy work, but not in like sort of not in the way that like it's not important, because it is really important. It just happens to all be like really time consuming. So you have like 5 tasks that you have to finish in a day that all take like 4 hours. And you're just kind of like, there's no other real choice to do, but, work forever. Which, I mean, that kind of led to our friendship. Is you're sitting there and you're like, I can't leave. I have to finish this. So you're there till 10, 11 at night, and you come back in the next morning and you do it again. And then, Friday comes and you try not to work on the weekend.
Well, yeah. And I was going to get to that is, the two of us sitting in an 8x8 glass room until 12:30 in the morning, just banging out the most tedious work possible. Because, and this is another thing I don't think people understand about our industry, is that a show like C2E2, there are 4 full-time employees on that show.
I was going to laugh because, I the heaviest I've ever been was during that show cycle. And I am just realizing it, which I've never thought about until this moment, that, I think it has probably a lot to do with the fact that we would just stress eat Dairy King hot dogs and fried food we could get our hands on, which I've never really alluded to the two. I was like, oh yeah, I just stopped working out, this and that. But no, it's probably because of all the horrible shit we ate.
Oh yeah, and late at night too.
Exactly.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, that's 100% the case. Um, it, I guess the moral of the story here, we could talk about the ins and outs of what we do all day, but I think uh, what 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 made you successful at Reed and was the initiative that you showed, and sometimes showing initiative is as easy as just always saying yes. And I think there's a bit of a stigma. There's like a negative stigma around people just saying yes to everything at a job. In some places, it can be really detrimental. Luckily, we don't work in a place like that, and you found yourself saying yes quite a bit, and as a result, it led to a pretty unique opportunity. You want to talk about how that all came to pass?
Yeah, it's funny you say showing initiative too, and I'm laughing about it because I feel like I showed initiative on everything that wasn't my actual job description. So I really didn't like being in marketing, or I guess I didn't have the best understanding of what it was when I was signing up for it. And all the stuff I found myself saying yes to and really being attracted to and wanting to drive myself into were what is now my current role, as a content coordinator. I think, even I think it was year 2 at C2E2, but I was like, hey, I want to book late night events. Like I want to book a concert, which was, instinctual for me, but it wasn't a marketing person's task, but I took it upon myself anyway. And, I was able to sell it out and it was really cool. And I think it was the first time that, it turned heads in the company where they were like, okay, maybe this isn't the right position for him. Cause, my notes from managers as a marketing coordinator weren't great. And I think they could see that I wasn't interested in the work, but they saw my passions were elsewhere. And it was nice that they, instead of kind of being like, hey, you're out the door, you didn't do what you're supposed to do, they were like, all right, we're going to shift you somewhere else. So, I give a lot of credit to Christina Rogers, our director, for being like, for putting her foot out or putting her neck out for me and saying like, hey, he's a content coordinator, we should get him into this role. And I think my first time really doing that was, her and Mike Armstrong talking and being like, all right, we're going to send him to England and start doing content for MCM. Their content coordinator at the time just had a baby, and they didn't have anyone to fill it. And everyone that was an actual content coordinator in the States was really busy. So they said, they sent me over, and I was there for about 3 months, in and out, which was, it was really revelatory. And I learned a whole lot on how to do this job. Mostly from kind of just getting thrown into the water and having to figure it out. But it was really fascinating to kind of learn that role in such a weird landscape.
Speaking as someone who was there for this entire ordeal and missing you desperately, by the way, talk about the Eddie that went to the UK versus the Eddie that came back from the UK, and how professionally it was a different guy.
The through line is I think both were very manic. Prior, I think, I felt very like I didn't know what I was going to do with myself in the company. And I was kind of like getting frustrated because I was in a role that even now at that point, I was like, all right, I don't want to be in this role. My partner that I was working with was not happy with the work I was doing. I wasn't happy with the work I was doing, and was really feeling like I had one foot out the door. And this opportunity came to me. And, it was a big step. Like I had a girlfriend that I was living with, and I kind of just was like, hey, I'm going away for a while. And the Eddie that came back was, I say he was still manic because I came back and I was actually still in a marketing role for at least a couple months. But it was this newfound passion for finally being able to do the job that I had been wanting to do at this company and not being able to do it, but still expected to do the job that, I didn't want to be doing previously and still didn't want to be doing. So it was a lot of stress. And I feel bad for every manager that I kind of had some manic explosion on kind of patiently waiting for my content position.